Ever since I started my Warhammer Fantasy Dark Elf army, I've wanted one of the metal Hydra kits. When I found one severely discounted on eBay, I picked it up. As you can see, it was in rough shape, just a pile of bits with some random paint on it. That's fine, it's something I can handle. I'm going to show you how I painted and assembled this Warhammer Fantasy Battles Dark Elf Hydra. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The eBay auction for this one was a collection of bits with as is listed. Fortunately, I was able to count heads and limbs on the photo and make sure everything was there. The first part was fitting the pieces together and figuring out how it all assembled. It had been roughly used by its previous owners, with green stuff and glue used to hold the metal heads and fill gaps, which made assembly a bit harder, actually, as I think some of the heads had been glued on wrong. When it comes to any model that you get in this sort of shape, I highly recommend taking some time to dry fit all the pieces together. This can save you a lot of time when it comes to gluing it all together and avoid mistakes that can force you to take it all apart again. This is even more true with the old pewter kits like this one, which often go together in, well, let's just call it a quirky fashion. GW has done some absolutely fantastic pewter kits. They've also done some, like the steam tank, that were tremendously clunky and a huge pain. This kit was somewhere in between, in my opinion. When things were lined up, they worked great. If they weren't, well, it was a pain. I spent some time using clippers and a hobby knife, and even just my fingers, picking off pieces of the previous glue and green stuff to get the best fits possible. I could tell after really looking at it that the last set of owners had glued on different heads and the wrong necks, as once I had all the glue remnants off, the heads connected and tight, almost holding without any glue. I don't have video of me gluing it together, but I just used standard super glue and accelerant. I didn't pin it either, as the connections were good enough that I didn't feel that I needed to. If it falls apart down the line, I'll probably regret that choice, but in the meantime, it has held up great. There's a sort of derpy excellence to this model, one that the newer plastic Hydra kit doesn't have. I can't say why I like it so much, just that it works. The slender necks and oversized heads just give it a comical and somehow still menacing look. Once I had the model assembled, I hit it with some gray primer. This was the moment of truth in a lot of ways, where I could see past the previous paint job and glue and see if I had assembled it right. It came out looking great, which was a huge relief. It was so cool to hold it in my hands, the weight of it too, being one of the old pewter models. I've wanted this model for something like 20 years, so there's a huge amount of excitement for me in actually having it ready to paint. With the Warhammer, the Old World Edition, there's a new base size for this guide. I 3D printed the right size, but now I had to base it to match my army. Enter stirrer sticks. Lots and lots of stirrer sticks. If you watch some of my other Dark Elf army painting videos, you know how this goes. I glued them down and made them look like the plank decking of a ship, adding a bit of chain for some visual interest. It came out pretty good, if I do say so myself. Once the super glue dried, I used a brown wash to stain the stirrer sticks into a darker brown, and then I had my base. The sticks also added a bit of structural support to the base with a heavy pewter model on it. Gluing the Hydra down wasn't hard, though you can see it took me a couple of attempts to get it to stick properly with how heavy it is. Once again, I didn't pin it, although this is probably where I should have done so. In my experience, when older pewter models break, it's most often where you have a joint of two different material types. There's a number of different factors that play into that. Surface is a big part, going from a rougher pewter surface to a smoother one. Also, temperature plays a big part. Leaving your superglued models in a cold car during the winter can have a serious impact, as the different materials cool and heat differently and the superglue can't flex with them. In this case, I have a plastic base, wood deck, and then the metal model. 3 materials. It should be perfect with no issues, right? I used contrast paint, striking scorpion green, for the lighter underbelly of the Hydra. I used contrast for this as it allowed for a nice gradient change and was a quick method to get a blended look to the lighter belly and the darker top. The Hydra has a lot of heads and necks. It honestly felt like it grew more of them while I was painting. There were so many different angles as I had to move it around in order to see and get in there to paint. It was almost comical trying to find all the different spots, especially with how the heads are arranged. I like the bright greens as well for this, as many Dark Elf monsters are painted in darker colors, which can often make it hard to make out the details on those models. Hydras are aquatic or swamp creatures. It fits better in my mind that they be camouflage for their environment, and greens help it fit in with that swampy vegetation. I switched to warp lightning contrast paint for the Hydra's upper parts. I like the subtle gradient between the two contrast paints, and I feel it really worked well on the model. Just like painting the underbelly, there seemed to be a lot more heads on this Hydra when painting it than when I first started. Clearly its regeneration is working. Maybe I should have used fire. This part was mostly a measure of applying good coverage and not slapping paint on the wrong areas. Contrast paint does a fantastic job of showing the details on these older models, and I feel like the colors gave it a living look, almost like a real five-headed, fire-breathing murder monster. It took a while to get the whole thing painted. There's a surprising amount of surface area on it, and it is a big, heavy model. I tend to listen to music, watch videos, or do audiobooks while I'm painting to help pass the time. Which, if you're looking for something to listen to, I've written a few books that are also available as audiobooks. A good epic fantasy novel like my own Echo of the High Kings can set the tone when painting a Warhammer Fantasy army. Having awesome monsters like this helps me to visualize some of the fights and battles I put into my writing. While I don't have a Hydra in any of my books, yet, it makes a good stand-in for sorcerous beasts that the characters do encounter. With two main colors done, all I had left was the details. The horns, mouths, tongues, claws, armor, and eyes. Lots of details. But here's the big reveal. I love how dynamic it looks. It's like it's rushing at the enemy, head snapping, fire spurting. The handlers drive it forward with whips and spears so that it crashes into the enemy. The cool pose of this model and the bright colors give it a living look. It's tabletop ready, and more importantly, it's ready to chomp the enemies of my Dark Elf army. I hope you enjoyed. Please remember to like and subscribe, and check out my books in the links below. Thank you for watching.